After my first and surprisingly adult-rated video on this topic, I proudly present another 5 things about Counter-Strike 2 that I like or find fun in some way. And this video is much more child-friendly. Echoes. Everybody likes echoes, even children. Back in the 90s, games seemed to like them too. Sure, that era couldn't do graphics that well, but they did do good audio. They had surround effects and occlusion you could actually hear the difference it was making. It used to be cool to have your own dedicated sound card slotted in just beneath your graphics card. Back before onboard audio supposedly got just as good, but I don't really think it is. So playing a game from that era? Listen to the echoes in Half-Life 1. You'd go into a new area and the sounds would change. The gun's echoes would change. Maybe it was all a bit over the top, but I kind of liked it. Source sadly did away with all these cool things, but they have been adding them back slowly ever since. Because cool sounding sounds are coming back into fashion. Ready or Not has just received an update for them. Rainbow Six Siege always had them, and CSGO has had a few stabs at it, but now Source 2 brings back the full force of 90s audio, and with a vengeance. Listen to this same gunshot, fired in different parts of the map. See, Half-Life 1 had the right idea all along. Global illumination. Light giveth and light taketh away. Global illumination is the bit that giveth, and it's why the levels in Counter-Strike 2 look so much brighter and more colourful than they did in CSGO. Every version of Counter-Strike has had pre-calculated global illumination, which calculates how the light from the sun and from other sources hits surfaces and then bounces off to illuminate the other areas that are nearby, indirectly. It's just that Counter-Strike 2 does more of this than CSGO did, which is why, as these games have progressed, the environments have become more brightly lit and more influenced by the surrounding colours of their environments. If anything, the light bounces in CS2 seem over the top. It's like if light hits a green surface, then the whole surrounding area becomes green as well. I mean, this happens in real life, but Source 2 seems particularly enthusiastic about the effect. As am I. But you know how I say light taketh away again? That's kind of what ambient occlusion is. Now, it doesn't need to be a separate effect. It's essentially all those dark areas of the map where light simply can't reach it in the first place. You can see this behind crates that are close to walls and places like that. Thanks to the massively improved shadow map detail, CS2 does a much better job of making these areas look dark and shaded than CSGO did, which can help make everything feel more connected to their surroundings. But all this is still cheating, because it calculates all this stuff before the level is even loaded. What would be much more impressive is if it could do all this in real time. Which brings us on to ambient occlusion. And I mean the bit that's in real time, and you'll see this in Counter-Strike 2 around moving objects like your character model. Look, as I approach this wall here, I start to cast a dark blob near to where I'm stood. Ambient occlusion. You can either have this effect disabled or set to medium or high. In practice, I didn't see much difference between the latter two, though you can see when the effect is stacked like this, then the shadows extend further away when on high. Disabling it completely makes a big difference though. Suddenly, the characters no longer cast any sort of shadow when indoors like this, and your weapon model no longer has localized shadows around its nether regions. Suddenly I understand why Valve doesn't want artists painting darker patches onto their gun models, because now the game's doing it itself. So what exactly is ambient occlusion? Well, it's sort of like a shadow, but not a direct one. It's more like the sum of all the light rays that were reaching a spot, but that are now being blocked by something nearby. Like I said earlier, light doesn't stop when it hits a surface. It bounces off and then hits another one and then bounces off that and hits another one and so on and so on and so on. So when you see a standard looking shadow, that's the result of the first and most powerful ray of light being blocked. But if you block all the later ones because they're all coming from different directions, it's just a big blobby shadow, hence ambient occlusion. I did used to force this feature on in Nvidia's control panel back when CSGO first came out. Problem was, it meant you could see the outlines of things through smoke grenades, and so Valve disabled it completely. Shame. But yeah, it's back in Counter-Strike 2 without the same bugs, and it's going to rock a lot of people's worlds when they realise they can tell an enemy is approaching by how a corridor gets just that little bit darker. Here's a great example of it in action. Note how the walls around these falling bodies get darker in a way that you can't quite explain but that looks really, really realistic. Ambient occlusion. It finally looks like it should do. It's simply beautiful. Now you might think this effect is overdone in Counter-Strike, because surely random places don't just get darker because something's near to them. But like a true gamer, when driving into town the other day, I whipped out my phone and took this picture. It's cloudy, so all shadows here are a bit ambient occlusion-y already. It's obviously most noticeable beneath the cars, but you can see that the effect extends out and around these things as well. I mean, it would have been better had I taken a video of this effect, but take it from me, this dark blobby effect was following the cars that they were representing. Stop what you're doing right now and hold your hand up close to a wall. Notice how the area covered by your hand gets darker, even though it doesn't look like a standard kind of shadow. And that's because it's all the indirect bounce lighting that you're blocking from reaching the surface. Ambient occlusion. This game is going to make us all obsessed with this effect. You can thank me later. Oh yeah, and your character has a body now. The year is 2023, we've had video games for decades, and yet it's still unusual to look down and to be able to see your legs and torso. Just stop and think about that for a moment. It's weird to look down and to be able to see your body there. In games we're all too used to being legless, floaty gun arms, which I guess has certain advantages like being able to see beneath you without obstructing vision, and it avoids having to see all of the shoddy animations that might be present otherwise. Counter-Strike 2 though certainly isn't the first game to attempt a visible body. I won't start listing them because it just legitimizes all those obnoxious comments I'll be getting telling me which ones I've forgotten, so I'll just talk about one other game, with that game being Left 4 Dead. Not the second one, only the first one. That's why you don't remember it having it. The animations are relatively serviceable too, so I'm kind of surprised they removed it for the second. That being said, the animations in Counter-Strike 2 seem to run at a smoother frame rate, and rather than facing sideways at times, are more insistent on facing where you're looking. Your body also fades out and goes transparent if it gets too close to your vision, presumably to aid you with being able to see your surroundings. So I'd say it's an improvement over the system in Left 4 Dead 2, but not by a huge amount. Half-Life Alyx took major strides in improving walking animations for characters in that game, having them automatically wibble their legs to shift their weight about in a convincing manner. So I'm kind of surprised that Counter-Strike 2 doesn't seem to integrate these same improvements. Your character insists on an awkward, wide-legged pose, with one or even both feet often left hanging over the edge of drops. There's definitely room for improvement here. So there, Valve has tried to add a new feature and I've spent all this time criticising it. But that's unfair because it also has its perks, like giving paid character models more of a purpose. You can see your weapons custom skins, why not extend that to your character models as well? But the big improvement is that being able to see your legs lets you see where you're stood in the level. You can see if your feet poke out from beyond a corner now, so it helps represent your position in the game better, which could help in a game as competitive as this one is. But there's also another thing that previous Counter-Strike games didn't have, and that was a representation of where your player's shadow was. Now you can see if that too is poking around an upcoming corner, or potentially giving away your position in some way. Really interestingly, I can't see many places on Dust 2 where it will. In the directions where it could have done, the edges of the walls have been shaved off to become diagonals, meaning you can see around the corner about the same time as your shadow begins to poke around it. So I can only count a handful of spots on this map where you do need to be mindful of your shadow. It's the same as it's been in CSGO for years, it's just that now you'll be aware of it. No skybox. Ever since Half-Life 1, the Counter-Strike series has all been set indoors, but with sky painted onto the outside areas to give the impression that it isn't. That's why grenades bounce off invisible walls wherever you go, unless the mapper has accounted for this by making the skybox walls super far away. So this Dust 2 version in Source 2 does still appear to have invisible sky walls everywhere. But most critically, grenades no longer care. They will pass straight through these invisible boundaries and into the unknown beyond. So you can now lob a grenade from anywhere in the level to anywhere else, provided you can throw hard enough. It's awesome, but is kind of how it should have been in the first place. You can even lob it straight off the side of the map and into the great unknown beyond. I don't know how it's taken this long to feature this, but it's here now, so there. Smoke grenades. How can I not cover the smoke grenades? This is something that everybody else has covered already, but for good reason, because it takes one of the weakest and most exploitable mechanics from CSGO and transforms it into one of the strongest and most exploitable mechanics in Counter-Strike 2. A quick recap. Smokes in CSGO made a ball of smoke, which was the same no matter where it was, and people got angry with all the bugs and exploits associated with them. Smoke grenades were one of the weakest aspects of the Source 1 engine, and that is saying something. So Valve was like, fine, we'll make exploitable smokes into a feature. And they've also made it so that these smokes approximately fill the space around them. So they're less likely to pass through solid walls, and you can even temporarily carve chunks out of them with explosive grenades or with bullets passing through them, which is ripe for advanced counter tactics and stuff like that. Don't like a smoke? Just blow it up. Now when somebody exploits them in some clever way, it's something to be praised instead of to be complained about. Players who pass through them remain coated in a vape cloud for a while after they've exited them again, which is also a nice little touch. From Valve's teaser video about them, you can see that it's done using some weird voxel-based approach, which takes into account what's around it, and then it's drawn as dense, fluffy smoke, which seems properly lit and coloured based on what's around it. It isn't perfect. You can still make out the layers to them, and they shimmer as you move. And I still expect one-way visibility spots to be a problem, but maybe it's less of a problem now that the smoke is continually changing shape and fluffing about all over the place. Smoke grenades will probably remain a controversial aspect of Counter-Strike, but hopefully now there will be some pros to them, instead of just a long series of cons. User-friendlier offline game setup. That's a bit of a mouthful, and for those of you counting, I have already covered 6 things. This video's title is a lie.
And now for my final 7th thing that I like about Counter-Strike 2. It is now a lot easier to set up an empty server with custom settings. I am a Counter-Strike YouTuber who doesn't really play Counter-Strike. What I spend most of my time doing is booting up empty maps and typing in console commands to tailor it to whatever weird project I'm experimenting with. Using memorized console commands, I can start an endless warm-up, I can hide the HUD, the player weapon, can activate cheats, no-clip, bots, mimic bots, infinite ammo, and so on. But the beauty of Counter-Strike 2 is that I can do a lot of these things from the menus properly. This probably won't make as much difference to me as it will for you, because I had most of these actions pretty well memorized already. And if anything, the new console's insistence to autofill is playing havoc with my muscle memory. But it's still great because the dropdown reminds me of the obscure wordings to spawn some of the Vega items, like the SG-556 and HKP-2000 weapons, as well as how to spell incendiary. It's not all positive because I now spend some of my time backspacing out what was incorrectly auto-filled in, but at least I don't have to tab out to look up the console commands online anymore. And from within the game's menus itself, it's got some great new features which will really help players of the game to practice stuff. There's this new grenade practice feature which I know you're just going to love. It shows exactly where a grenade will land and how it will get there. It's going to greatly speed up the process of coming up with new throws, and I expect to see some utterly insane ones in upcoming matches because of this feature. And look, an option to turn on a moving crosshair, which moves with the recoil pattern. What a great way to practice your spray control. This is a feature that's available even in online play, so there are some great general quality of life improvements going on here. It's not perfect, it would be nice for Valve to bring back all the console commands for practice modes that they previously disabled, and other features they could add to offline servers which would help me to produce content would be things like a fly mode, perhaps triggering it by double jumping like in Minecraft. A buy weapons anywhere feature, a bot spawning feature, visible bullet trajectory and penetration info, and a bomb radius and damage calculator. Add all this, and Counter-Strike 2 will be perfect for me. Just make it like Unreal Tournament again. Why not go all out and add mods? I still think Unreal Tournament was the golden standard for this kind of server setup. Valve, please add.